Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. This is Isaiah Diesel, or this morning, this afternoon. What is it for you? Afternoon, Thomas?
It's afternoon here.
Thomas, aka Mr. Holy Koolaid.
Yep.
Is that right? Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, beyond words, for joining me. I mean, they say in comedy you should always punch up, but you're like really punching down by coming on this stream with me. So I really appreciate that.
How do you know how tall I am?
Well, first of all, no, I mean, like, as far as audience and stuff, you should be going on places that are bigger than you. But
Hey,
you do actually, right? Exactly. Thank you so much. You do look like you're about 6 feet tall, though. Am I right?
About 6'2".
Whoa. Actually, I want to start off. I want to clear the air on something because I know you're an ex-Christian, so I know you know the Bible pretty well, right? Fairly.
Yeah, I not to toot my own horn, but I've read a lot. Yeah.
But the Bible says that we should love our neighbor and stuff. But I got to say right off the top, I hate you, man, because you have some amazingly beautiful, the consistency, the bounce in your hair. It's like, what are you using in that? Like Sheen or Jerry Curl? Like what?
It's butter. I take a bunch of butter and lather it on.
so unfair, man. I'm the Christian here, and I'm balder than a blue jay. But first and foremost, we always like to start off with a friendly fire round. So we're just going to ask you some bizarre, maybe random questions, and just to kind of set the tone of a nice, easy conversation. Usually, these conversations can get a little bit intense, but we like to keep things a little light here, and so we're going to. All right, so here we go. Favorite 80s band. You can use two. It's okay. I love the 80s.
This is actually such a hard question for me because when I think 80s band, I'm like, wait, did that start in the 70s? Did that start in the 80s? I don't know if I can give a good answer on this one.
Duran. I'll just say that anybody knows me knows I am a huge fan of Duran. So, okay. You want to take it doesn't have to be the favorite.
I'll take a pass on that one.
Okay. All right. Here we go. So if you, what would your last meal on death row be?
My last meal on death row. That's hard. See, I would have answered you with like a nice steak dinner or something, but since I'm a vegetarian now, I'm like,
really?
Yeah. If I'm dying, I guess,
Oh god. You ever had Korean barbecue?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. I just got it grilled here, so I make that with my wife. Samgyeopsal, very delicious. All right, and here we go. If you had to own any giant feline, which one would it be?
A giant feline, like a
giant feline. Lion. Yeah.
Maybe like a Bengal tiger.
That's a good call.
Yeah, that'd be kind of fun. An ocelot would be cool because I feel like you could kind of like wrestle around and play with them, and
They do that. They have big giant felines in like the United Arab Emirates and stuff. It's like a status symbol. But okay, we got two more. If you were in the CIA and in charge of the torture department, and you had to play a song on loop to torture someone, what would you play?
Oh,
I know these are weird questions. Weird questions.
Either Friday by Rebecca Black.
I got that recently.
Or I could walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more.
Kenneth Leonard actually said that one. But I think pretty much anything by BTS would suffice. Yeah. You know BTS?
Yeah. Korean, K-pop.
Yeah, K-pop. I'm in Korea, so I'm a little bit impartial to them. All right, and here we go. Last question. If you were stuck on a deserted island, what action star would you trust to get you off of that island?
Ooh.
From the movies.
Yeah, to get me off the island.
Right. And it can't be like Iron Man. Don't say Iron Man. That's a little unfair.
Yeah. Rick from Rick and Morty.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. These questions.
It's not really an action star because I could say Rambo. Because
Rambo. No, he'd probably just blow everything up. But
the thing is, like, if you actually look at like survival experts who are like reviewing the traps and the methods and special forces people, it's not that realistic.
Okay.
So I don't know if the stuff he pulls would work.
Yeah, he builds like that big old spike that hits that. Like, there's no way you're going to build that thing in this small amount of time. But okay, just real quick, if you
maybe MacGyver,
there you go. If you wouldn't mind to give me a very, very, very short, like 2-minute, I'll call it your atheist testimony, like your atheist conversion story. Try to do this really fast because we'll unpack it. I'm going to unpack it with some of these questions. But yeah, if you can, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a evangelical Christian missionary kid. I'm from the U.S., but I was raised overseas. Really threw myself wholeheartedly into my faith. Was a young Earth creationist and homeschooled the whole 9 yards. I did church camp. I was a church camp counselor. I did a youth group, all of it, and even wound up becoming a missionary myself for a semester. Youth pastor, worship leader. And then eventually when I was in college, I really started to kind of ask bigger questions. And I didn't become an atheist right away. It was a very gradual shift. I kind of went from a biblical literalist, young earth creationist to more of a literal Christian. I was kind of, for a while, I was like a Christian I was okay with gay marriage. I was fine with abortion and stuff. And I didn't believe in a literal hell. I didn't
fine with abortion.
I didn't believe that the world was created in 6 days. The evolution was. I was kind of like in the middle, but I still, had what I would call a personal relationship with Jesus, and I was still, actively involved with the church. And then eventually, I kept asking questions and looking more into abiogenesis, evolution, and how it all works. I started getting a little bit more into kind of asking these philosophical questions and examining apologetics. But the big thing for me was just reading through the Bible from start to finish and realizing that a lot of this stuff
didn't make sense.
It didn't stand up to scrutiny. There were too many internal contradictions. It was obviously man-made, and just seeing kind of the history of how all of this stuff came about. That for me, that was kind of I'm done with Christianity moment. But I was still kind of a deist. I thought maybe there was a God, and then I didn't really, all the gaps that I had filled with God kind of started filling up, and I had the puzzle, even with a few missing pieces, the picture didn't really look like something that was a theistic framework.
That was interesting, though. I just saw your atheist testimony, and it said that the Ken Ham debate was like the last straw for you. And I really am really against stupid Christian apologetic stuff. So one of
that was definitely a moment where I was done kind of with Christianity, because I had been taught that there's tons of great scientists who are Christian, and from the young earth creationist perspective, that was definitely I was very fed up and frustrated because I felt like I'd been lied to about a lot of these people, and I saw the disingenuousness of it. But at that, I wouldn't say that I was a full-fledged atheist. I had really been gradually kind of making the shift in that direction. At that point, I was like, I'm done with Christianity. And then I kind of became more of a hardline atheist just in the time between that and, when I started.
So you went from an evangelical Christian to an evangelical atheist. That's what I describe anti-theist as an evangelical atheism. Do you think that's an accurate description? I
mean, it depends on how you describe evangelical. If you just
evangelizing,
if you describe it as trying to convince other people to, shift their position, then I'm not going out and knocking on doors, and I'm not handing out, material and stuff. I'm on my corner of the internet, and I'm sharing my story. And it originally started as me just deconstructing and trying to figure out and share my journey, and people came to me. So
I really want to talk about that, your channel. I've been just a kind of funny little background story. I think last night you told me you were up at 2:30 and you're like, oh, I got to go to bed. And then you sent me your calendar to schedule this. And I didn't realize that the calendar was on your time. So I clicked like 2:30 and I think I clicked. What time is it there for?
It's 12:40 right now.
Okay, so I clicked that time. It was like 2:30 in the morning my time. So that's just a kind of funny coincidence.
No, you could have gone in and read.
I know, but I thought this would actually be a good time. Maybe people are maybe would be convenient. I don't know. Anyway, so actually, do you mind? Because I've noticed that you've never mentioned the place that you grew up in. Is that for like? Are you not at liberty to discuss that?
I typically avoid giving the exact.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Not for myself, but for the
privacy family
and security.
Absolutely,
of people I care about.
Absolutely.
So I kind of keep that vague. But what I am quite open with is it's a former Soviet Muslim country, and I mean I've traveled to and been involved in missions related stuff in a number of those countries. Yeah. Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan,
Tajikistan.
I haven't been to Tajikistan, but yeah, like that whole region, that part of the world. Georgia,
the stands,
but Russia,
the stands,
and even non-countries like Tatarstan in Russia. Like I've so that whole part of the world I'm very familiar with, but I don't give the exact country.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I wasn't sure if that was a coincidence or. And now I definitely know I don't want to probe any further with that. Yeah. So I will say real quick. Okay, can you share the age you were when you went back to the United States?
Yeah, so I was 3 years old when we first went over there.
3, okay.
And we would have furloughs periodically where we'd come back to the States for a summer or for a year and then go back. And then I came back for good. I visited a few times since, but I came back to go to college when I was 17. So
17, okay. All right, so okay, good. So real quick, I'm just going to ask you one other question. And what denomination was that?
I actually, I had to ask my parents this specifically because it's a little tricky. Because the church I was a part of was a multi-denominational church. The church I was there at locally, the missions organization was YWAM, which is a multi-denominational missions.
Yeah, I know what that one is.
But my parents' home church was like a Bible church. And then they were also involved with a kind of a Baptist church. So it's kind of like this whole mix of different denominations. But kind of the main thing for my parents was they didn't want to get hung up on all of these little kind of finicky infighting things. They wanted more on.
I totally get that.
Gospel.
Yeah.
We believe in the death and resurrection of Jesus, and we want to share and spread his love. And, basically there's going to be a lot of diversity of opinions, and every tongue, tribe, and nation will come together. And so for my parents, even this notion a lot of Christians have that, like, they'll say, well, you're a Catholic, you're not a true Christian. You're Orthodox, you're not a true Christian. For my parents, they're like, it's not really our place to judge. Like, if you love Jesus and you believe in the death and resurrection, like, you're welcome to come worship with us or whatever.
Yeah, I have Mormons over every week, and they've came on the podcast 3 times, and I've sat down and we've had some very civil talks with them on here. So I do tend to believe that, hey, if someone says they believe in Jesus, that's good enough for me. I don't want to play God and try to decide one way or the other. But I do want to ask you, before we get into the questions I sent you, I've lived overseas now for over 10 years. And it is next to impossible for me to move back to America at this point, because my way of thinking has been so Asianized. It's like and there is a technical term for this. It's called being third cultured, where like when I went to Bible college, I met with some girls who grew up in Africa. And so they're hanging out with these like indigenous tribes and stuff growing up, speaking the language. And obviously they don't fit in there. But then they get so accustomed to that thinking, they go back to America and they don't fit. They totally cannot. It's a culture shock, So me, whenever I lived in South Korea for 5 years, well, when I first got here, I had a culture shock. But then I got divorced and I went back to America, and I had a bigger culture shock going to America. It really. And so I've been back now 5 years. I reunited with my wife. And our daughter was conceived the night I got back to reunite with my wife, which is amazing. But I do want to ask you something, because one of the things that struck me most about your testimony, your atheist testimony, and is one of the things that caused me the biggest amount of hatred of religion, God, and my dad. Maybe this is not at all accurate for you, but have you ever heard of the expression that the cobbler's kids goes without shoes?
I have not, but it instantly clicks. Like I get
it instantly, because I heard you saying that you're traveling in a city of 2 million people by yourself. That is pretty disturbing, though. Now, but I live in South Korea, so in Japan, I'm not. They actually have a series on this where they send these kids out, like 4 years old. They go out and do all kinds of shopping and stuff. You even seen here in South Korea. You're like, God, these kids are like really developed. But do you if you're growing up on the mission field, because I grew up as a minister's son, and I literally hated my parents. Like I hated them beyond words, because we adopted, like, through the course of my childhood, like over 10 kids into our home. And it seems like really. And it seems like my parents always had time for, like, to try to fix other people's problems. But the suicidal, the depression and stuff I was going through, they didn't catch any of that. And so I would be overseas just getting shit-faced drunk, trying to build up the courage to, like, call my dad and stuff. But I think that's growing up inside of a minister's home, it's one of the things it caused me some cognitive dissonance about if Christianity can be true or not, because it just seems like whenever you have such a disconnect, that you should be taking care of your family first. So did you ever feel like you got deprioritized, on the mission field? Because I can imagine that would be really harsh.
Honestly, not anywhere near to the extent that you're talking about. We didn't adopt any other kids. I did have 3 other siblings, so I still do.
Okay.
I think that my parents did a pretty good job of not playing favorites with us. And so I never felt like I was unloved or uncared for. I don't think that my parents were abusive. I had a loving home. There was, however, there were aspects of my upbringing that I'm still kind of deconstructing, but I don't think that it comes from a place of my parents being awful parents. It's more that there's some religious toxic stuff. Yeah. You're familiar with, like, religious trauma syndrome.
Yeah.
Ideas surrounding, religion and ideas of how you should date or if you shouldn't date at all.
Yeah.
Like I Kiss Dating Goodbye and purity culture. And I was mistaught a lot of information. So things related to sex and my sex education was terrible. And
hey, I been there, done that. Everything you're saying, I totally get to.
But as far as feeling like my parents weren't there for me, I don't think I ever felt that.
Okay.
Way.
Okay, that's
unloved. And I
for the record,
to this day, I think I still have a loving relationship with my parents. I'm not super close to them because they live on the other side of the world, and I'm
right.
So we don't talk very often. But whenever they come back to the States, we have reunions, and I don't have any bad blood or ill will towards them.
Hey, Don, this says, why don't you watch Thomas Westbrook's channel before you diss him?
He did.
I bet his channel is really good, so I highly suggest that. I really can't believe you're on my channel because I'm so small. Yours is massive. But thank you again, and I definitely would say that the content is very good, and we're about to discuss that right now. But I do want to.
He was telling you to watch my channel. He was responding to someone else.
Yeah. For the record, the last time I saw my mom, she wouldn't even speak to me because I got this I got all the world religions tattooed. I got all the world religions tattooed all over me. And the last time I was in America, she was so upset that I wasn't a Christian. And she refused to talk to me. And I was so hurtful. And whenever I started getting into Islam, she told me if I converted to Islam, she wouldn't have a relationship with me. And so, by the way, we both experienced the Holy Land as atheists, because I went there as an atheist myself. I'll show you this picture of myself. I was really into Islam. So can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. But anyway, my dad is my best friend in the world right now. So we were able to reconnect after I did become a Christian. But that being said, I do want to jump right into the questions. And here we go. What has been the number one thing you've learned about on your channel? And if you could give me, I mean, I didn't realize what you went through to create your channel. So if you could give like a 2-minute backdrop of that, that is like some amazing stuff right there. That is jaw-droppingly amazing.
Yeah. So I'll start with the second question of like what I went through to start my channel. I've been doing video editing stuff just as a hobby for probably
10 years.
Over 10 years. Like,
wow.
Pushing 20 years now.
Whoa.
Since I was like 15, so I'm 32 now, so about 17 years. And I started just with like fun stop motion Lego videos where I had a 1 megapixel camera and I'd take a photo, move to like, take another photo. But then as I got more into it, my brother does film stuff full time, out in Hollywood. And so he kind of coached me a little bit in how to use the Adobe suite. And then I actually bought a camera on a credit card, a video camera, in order to submit a film to a film competition when I was at Texas A&M, and there was like $1,000 prize for the best one. And I was confident enough in my skills and ability, and also I didn't think too many other people would be submitting stuff. And so I filmed something, submitted it, wound up winning, and then used the prize money to pay for the camera. But when I started my channel, I'd recently been in a abusive relationship, a very emotionally abusive marriage. And I felt I was at kind of a low point, and I was an atheist before I ever got married, but I wanted to kind of leave the city that I was living in. And I'd been wanting to travel. Having grown up my whole life, I'd never been to East Asia, and my sister had been to Thailand. I'd recently read some books on, travel, digital nomad stuff, working abroad, and Chiang Mai in Thailand.
Wow. I've been there. I've been there. The
capital of the whole like digital nomad thing. It's the place that everyone goes to start and kick off when they're working, because they have a lot of co-working spaces, coffee shops. You can get by speaking English just fine, and everything.
Yeah.
So I figured,
oh my God,
take out all my savings, sell all my stuff, just get a little gear, and I packed it all into like one backpack and a laptop bag, and hit the road.
Crazy.
Lived in Thailand and Vietnam for about 5 months, kind of
5 months
back and forth, and it was awesome. I got to travel, and then came back to the States, did the conference circuit. But I didn't have a lot of money, but I really wanted to see at that point if I could do this full time, because my channel was relatively new, but I was working like 18 hours a day on it.
Wow.
It was taking off. In the first few months of going full time, I'd already hit over 10,000 subscribers.
Jesus.
So I decided to keep going, but come back to the US and do the conference circuit and kind of meet people and get plugged in and network and kind of bring the community together. Because it was all over the place at that point. Like there wasn't really a online atheist community. It was just a few sporadic content creators here and there.
You were living in your car.
Yeah, so I came back. I bought a Prius, and I would do what's known as Prius camping, where you put the back seats down, shift the front seats all the way forward, and you can kind of make a bed out of it.
Wow.
So I would go to like I went up to Colorado. I camped in the mountains and like worked from like coffee shops and stuff, and I traveled around. I did probably 10 different conferences that year alone. And I drove all the way to like Canada, North Carolina, Colorado, Texas, Chicago, back. And so I kind of did that for a little while. But you start to get really restless because it's difficult to find places to sleep at night. And there's always this uncertainty. I would shower in the gym at like
I saw that
fitness place.
It
was what's it called?
In shape,
not Planet Fitness. It was
in shape,
not In Shape.
24-hour fitness.
No, well, God.
Okay, that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant.
It's the one with the little purple dude on the thing. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. And I have a picture of it on my Instagram. But anyways, I had, after doing that for a while, it really starts to drain on you because you're stressed all the time. You're looking for places you don't have the security of a bed. You don't have the comfort of a bed. And it's being homeless it's incredibly taxing and stressful. And it becomes really hard to kind of have the same mental clarity and focus that you do. The security, the baseline security of not having to worry about money and housing and all this stuff.
Hold on one second. I was homeless 2 months in South Korea because of some visa issue. It was one of the best experiences that I've ever had in my life, honestly. I'm glad it only lasted 2 months, but I learned so much about myself and problem solving. And it was like the first time where I couldn't just call up my parents to get me out of the situation. So Anytime Fitness, by the way, is that what it's called?
Anytime, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Can you continue your story, please?
So I did that for a while, and then I moved to Oklahoma, and I started dating someone there, and I lived there for a little over a year, I think. And at that point, that relationship kind of started to go south, and so I moved down to Texas.
That's where you are now?
Yeah, and so I'm in Austin, and that whole time I was trying to kind of bring the community together online, the atheist content creators. So I made a Facebook group, invited them all in. We were sharing tips and tricks, going on each other's channel. And around that time, I started a conference called the Faithless Forum.
Oh, wow, that's you, Jesus.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I got to stop saying Jesus. Okay, I'm sorry. Big Bang, big crunch.
So, and I started that with a number of other content creators, and so we had several on the board, and then they kind of wound up going off and doing other things and shifting directions. So now that I think we've done that conference for 3 years in a row, it's continued.
Wow.
And this last year, I still did one last year and last November here in Austin at the Hilton. And it's just been really, really cool getting to meet all kinds of people, getting to talk to not just YouTubers, but to find scientists and various experts in different fields, to interview them, to meet some of my heroes like Randy, who's kind of a legendary magician back in the day, who would take on a lot of the psychic and paranormal claims and test them and recreate them using just magic tricks and expose a lot of them.
Any chance you saw his documentary? It's called A True Liar or The Great Liar, something like that.
Honest Liar?
It shows an Honest Liar. It shows how he's really hiding the fact that he's homosexual. That was a really good documentary.
Right here.
Okay. All right, there you go.
I have a signed book. It was really sad because I did an interview with him at a conference in South Charleston, North Carolina, for the American Atheist annual conference, and they had it during the solar eclipse, and so it was going to be a bunch of atheists there at the solar eclipse. We wound up getting cloud cover, so But
that's what you get. That's what you get for messing with God, man. Don't mess with God.
He covers up the divine sign with cloud cover. So James Randi was there. That's when I got to interview him for my channel, and I turned it into kind of an animation, like a cartoon style. And I didn't see him again for another year or two. And then I saw him in Vegas at SciCon, and I showed him the video result, and he loved it. And he had one more book at his table that was for sale. And I bought it, and I asked him, he wasn't doing book signings anymore. He's just because he was really old and didn't want to be swarmed. But he said, hey, for you, I'll do it. So he signed that copy of the book, and I wound up giving it to my girlfriend at the time as a gift.
And then you broke up.
And then we broke up.
Oh, God. You know what? You mentioned Chiang Mai. And things are so cheap there. Because after my mom died, I went through a total mental breakdown to where I couldn't function. I was already an alcoholic at the time, but it just turned me to an even bigger alcoholic. So I couldn't even I had to go to Thailand, and I was 2 months of a lot of debauchery and every last drug I could get my hand on there, try to ease that internal pain that was inside of me. And I did something very similar when I got divorced with my wife, who I'm married to now. She's Korean. Her name's Sue. But I went to the Netherlands, and same exact concept. I'm like, I'm gonna do as many drugs as I conceivably can do. But those I had some really unhealthy coping mechanisms back then. But
when I was there, I didn't. I mean, I was so honed in and focused on, because I was terrified that like I wasn't going to be able to make it, or I'd be stuck over there and wouldn't have an income.
And you took out a loan.
Yeah, well, I cashed in my retirement savings, sold everything I had, took out like a $20,000 business loan.
Wow.
Basically was like, hey, if this starts to all run out, like once I get down to this specific amount, I'm heading home. Because I'd heard horror stories of people who, like
got stuck,
who would get there and then wind up homeless and get stuck. And I didn't want that to be me, because I'm like, how do you get out of a situation like that? And because, my parents are still religious, it's like if they were to come along and bail me out, it would be sort of to them like a prodigal son, I told you so type story. Or they'd be like, well, you're just an atheist and we don't believe in what you're doing. Why should we help you?
Wow.
I don't think they would do that. I think that they would, they still love me and stuff, but I didn't want to be in a situation where I'd have to find out. And I'm very independent and self-sufficient. Yeah. So I figured I would try and see if I could make it. And, the whole time I'm working, I'd probably work until 2 or 3 in the morning. There was a 24/7 co-working space, and met a few good friends there who were kind of doing the same thing. But I think I got drunk maybe in the 5 months I was there, maybe like 2 times or something.
Wow.
And even then it wasn't like shit faced. And I mean, drugs overseas, I'm too scared. I'm too scared to try stuff, because it's like I don't want to end up waking up in a bathtub with a missing kidney.
Oh my god! Or in one of those Thailand jails, like Broke Down Palace with I think Kate Beckinsale. But I had no regard for my life at that point, because I was already contemplating committing suicide, and the only thing that was
it's self-medication.
Well, the only thing that was keeping me from committing suicide, well, one, there was the fear of hell. I shouldn't say the only thing, but the other one was that I knew how disappointed my mom would be in me if she knew that I killed myself right after like she died, that she would feel like she wasted her entire life. And so actually I wound up going to Cambodia and like renovated an orphanage there. And I felt like my mom could like live vicariously through me, because she was a really strong humanitarian. So that gave me like a passion to start living and do humanitarian work. But that's a really long answer for you to say, what have you learned from your channel? Can you answer that one?
What have I learned from my channel? Oh God, a lot of stuff. Even though my primary focus is like scientific skepticism, critical thinking, kind of push back against dogma, that's such a huge umbrella that I cover everything from religion, religious fundamentalism, analyzing biblical stories, to history and archaeology, to psychics and pseudoscience and aliens and UFOs, and there's so many topics that I cover on my channel. I think that the biggest thing that I've learned is through this process, it's been how to think critically and apply the scientific method across multiple fields, across multiple possible fields.
All right.
Because recently, when I made the shift from focusing more on science and the paranormal and stuff like that, shifting more to history and archaeology and looking into the history of like the Old Testament and the archaeological finds of the time, what I found was all of a sudden I was in a completely new environment where tools of archaeology, they're different tools, they're different methods that they use to kind of figure out the past.
Yeah.
They can't say something with certainty because you can't like recreate it, but it is forensics, and they do science. And so they're still examining and figuring it out. They're just using, new tools and stuff compared to, like you might use a telescope, for example, to look up at the sky, but you might use ground penetrating radar to, see what's underneath the ground. And you might be able to use, a spectrograph to see like, hey, what elements are these planets or are these stars and stuff made of out there in outer space, whereas you're using the same tool kind of in doing a spectral analysis to see like the chemical components of something that you have that you just dug up from a site. And so So, for example, it was like a spectroscope versus like a spectrograph or something. And so you're using a lot of the same tools, but it's not just the same tools. You're using the same type of methodology of like, you still have to make a hypothesis. You still have to test it. You still have to have something that's falsifiable and have different claims with different probabilities. And, you have different levels of confidence within the expert community and different levels of consensus. And you'll have majority and minority opinions, and then weird fringe scholars that believe in stuff that's obviously debunked. And there's good reasons why it's debunked in all of these fields. And with all of them, they have journals where they can publish and get it peer reviewed and have people kind of piece it apart and see, like, did you follow good methodology to, be able to figure this out? Are there things that you're missing? And, and so there's kind of this refereeing of, the process. So I think what I've learned through all of this is that the conclusions aren't always perfect, but you have to trust the process, because the process of the scientific method, it is kind of a structured process of testing, falsifying, figuring it out, and then going back and testing again. But there's some things that have been completely debunked and are already falsified. And when someone comes along and says, oh, well, science has got stuff wrong, so this stuff might be true, it's like, okay, but some stuff, it's like there are ways that you can, legitimately 100% say, like, this is not true, and those things have already gone through that process. The stuff that's kind of on the edge that we're still testing and figuring out might have a bunch of different competing theories for why that's the case, but we still know that, something is the case. So, like, when I throw something up in the air, it comes back down. It doesn't float away. So we're like, okay, there's something causing it to fall. We're not all of a sudden going to be like, well, that's wrong, it's actually just, not going to fall. But as far as why it works and how it works, you can test the speed at which things are attracted, but the theories as to why that's the case might be kind of fine-tuned. And when you get a new theory for gravity, when you get something like general relativity compared to Newtonian mechanics, it's not like all of a sudden the measurements from Newtonian mechanics are wrong. It's just the precision of them is now out to, however many decimal points more, and it's a more accurate theory than the original one. If that
any chance you've ever read the book The Invisible Gorilla?
I haven't read the book, but if it's referring to the social experiment where people
right.
familiar.
Yeah. Well, it talks in there about what you would, I guess, you call the confabulation, which is where sometimes people are unintentionally lying, which could be the case. You could say that Colin Powell was doing whenever he was making a case to invade Iraq, because he was just presenting the information given to him. So for him, he wasn't lying, but obviously we know after the fact that he was lying. And so in that book, he talks very specifically about Hillary Clinton, and she gives this ridiculous story about her landing in the Bosnian War and like under sniper fire, and they say she had to like rush off, but then the clips came up of her walking off the plane like raving and stuff. And initially you might just say, yeah, she was probably lying off of her butt, right? Which I don't at all doubt that she was intentionally lying. But the point is that he was showing that it is completely possible to take two different to remember something else that you might have seen on TV. And especially, I think I was reading with that one, is that the more you tell a story, the more it can get messed up. And so the invisible gorilla, it's not just that. He talked in there about like the Dunning-Kruger effect and how that could affect your, what you think that you know. But also probably the biggest one, which this is kind of a weird name to call it, but have you ever heard of the Mandela effect?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just saw the movie last night, by the way. It's a ridiculously bad movie. I'm not sure. Did you see the movie?
I haven't seen the movie, but I'm familiar with the Mandela effect.
Don't.
And the thing is that the Mandela effect, depending on what specifically you mean by that, is it is a real phenomenon used to describe the fact that collectively as a culture, we misremember things
Right.
as a different way than they actually were. So for the viewer's sake, just a description of it would be like if someone says, oh, remember the point in Star Wars where he says, Luke, I am your father.
I am your father.
Yeah, I remember that. And then you go back and you watch it and he says, no, I am your father. He doesn't say Luke. And so everyone's like, oh my God, I misremembered. Maybe history itself has changed and it originally was this way. And then we're all living in the Matrix and somehow it's been changed retroactively. And the thing is, there's not really any evidence to show that that's the case, but we do have a lot of evidence to show that people's memories change. There's been experiments done by Julia Shaw. There's been experiments done by Elizabeth Loftus showing that not only can you implant false memories in people, but also when you prime people to believe a certain thing, sometimes their memories will change over time and they'll tell a story and even think sometimes that they were the one that did something that they
absolutely. And that's actually, I do want to get finally into question 2. 40 minutes in, we're finally at question 2. But are you familiar with the Einstein effect and how it can affect our perceived knowledge? Have you ever heard of that?
Before the show, he sent me a list of some of these questions and that was on there. And I was like, oh, I should probably go and research that so I can sound smart. But
you're way smarter than me. Like I said, you're punching way down to talking to me.
I might be familiar with it, but like right as I was like going to Google it, I thought I thought that, you know what, it'll be fun to learn something new.
Okay, great. Yeah,
refresh my memory.
I'll explain. Okay, so I'll explain this real quick to you. So suppose you have 2 or 3 containers. One of them holds 3. One of them holds 3 gallons. One holds 5, and the other one you got to measure out exactly 4 gallons. Like, there's 2 ways you could solve this, but can you think of how you can solve one?
Yeah, I would say one way to solve it would be to combine them both into a new container and then split that in half.
Okay.
So you if you have like
that would be how
it in, and then exactly half, and you get to 4. The other way would be to just take the one that has 5 and just pour out a gallon worth into it until you have 2 equal containers.
So if you needed to do it exactly, actually, I just had a podcast last night, and the guy solved it in a different way than is the fastest way. But the fastest way would you take the 3 gallon, pour it into the 5, fill it up again, pour out 2 gallons into there, and so there'll be 1 more remaining in the 3 gallon. Then you dump it out, pour it in, and then fill up the 3 gallons 1 more time and dump it in. Anyway, you can do that way, or if you think about it, take the 5 gallon, pour it into the 3 gallon, then you're going to have 2 more in the 5 gallon. And so you dump that into the other one and then just repeat it. So you get 2 and 2. Anyway.
So you only have those 2 containers and you're trying to get 2 and 2 in the bottom. I thought you were saying like you want to have like 4 and 4 or something.
Well, you have a third. Maybe I didn't explain that well enough, but you had a 3rd container and you're trying to get exactly 4 in there. Anyway, the point of that is this guy, he does these experiments where he starts to train people to solve these kind of problems, but they get collectively harder. Okay. And then abruptly he reduces them to just some that like, you just have to combine 2 of them. So it's like, it's insanely simple, right? You just you combine this one and combine this one and just pour it into the same one. And the problem is that what do you think happened whenever he gave like the simplest answer? Like, what do you think was the response of people?
They're probably so primed to
exactly
crazy complicated ways that they completely miss the simple option.
They couldn't. And it's funny. You got to see. Do you know who Vsauce is?
Yes.
He does a really great video on that, but he actually reads from the people's responses, and they got really pissed off. Like they felt like they were being manipulated. Because it made them feel really stupid that they couldn't solve one. And the amazing thing is that he did like a totally separate group and he didn't do any of the priming and just gave them that simple one. And it was like so obvious. You just combine this one and this one, and there you go. So anyway,
a similar experiment with like where they do that, but then they'll like bring in a bunch of kindergarten kids, and the kindergarten kids instantly come up with the solution while they're trying to overcomplicate it.
And so there's this interesting quote that he quotes on there by Francis Bacon, but it says, "The human understanding, when it's once adopted an opinion, draws all things else to support and agree with it," which you could also call that like confirmation bias, right? You've heard of that. So I know as a believer, that's just something I am certainly capable of falling into.
As a human, but capable of falling into it.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you think that, do you feel like you've been primed to think in a certain way? And then, because I was watching another one that you were doing on the secular countries, and you actually even admitted it. You're like, well, I want to make atheist countries seem like better or whatever, but you glossed over some pretty like glaring facts about some of the countries. Like, for example, like Sweden, up till like 2000, they had you just described apologetics. Up until 2000, they had like state religion, and same thing like with Denmark, because atheists love to point to those kind of specific examples and say, well, these people are like less religious, and they have like this amazingly secular and like clean and safe environment, which they do. But the reality is that if you actually just go to CIA.gov and just look up the statistics, you will find that the vast majority of those countries have overwhelmingly religious populate. Now, I know I saw you get into debate with. Can
I respond?
Hold on. Yeah. You can. Just 1 second. With inspiring philosophy, and you guys were really bringing out some like fine points on this one about like what does it mean to actually be religious and intrinsic religiosity. But yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so a couple things there is one, to respond to the first thing that you said about confirmation bias. I think absolutely as a human, we're all prey to that. Like that's just any logical fallacy, any cognitive bias. We as humans, just given the nature of our brains and the way that this hunk of meat in our heads works, we take mental shortcuts and we have ways that we will view the world, and we have biases that we view the world through. I think that the goal for any of us, whether you're a Christian or an atheist, is to try to take those biases into account. So in the world of science, they, especially when you get into like academia and stuff, that's one thing that's really, really strongly stressed is it's not that we can eliminate our biases, but we should be upfront and honest about them, and we should try to counteract them as much as we can. And so that I think that's an important point to make. I wouldn't say that where I think it's a little different from me versus someone who's extremely religious is I don't have a Great Commission. I was not told to go out and share the gospel to all nations. I'm not under any obligation to, convert people. I want to figure out what's true. I want to follow that and go where it leads. And I want to do what I can to make society and the world,
sure,
best that I can.
Yeah, I think you're well-intentioned. That's for sure.
So if I find out that something that I believe isn't true, I do think that I've already demonstrated that I'm willing to change my mind because I've done it in the past and making the shift. But also, I think that whenever we put ourselves in an echo chamber and we're not exposed to other positions, we can still formulate an idea of like, this is how the world works and become dogmatic. But I think that there are ways to try to be more objective, and I try to do that as much as I can. Now, the second part of your question, on the aspect of Denmark and Sweden, Scandinavian countries, or Nordic countries if you include Finland. First, the information that you're talking about from like the CIA fact book and stuff is that these countries oftentimes, because if you look historically back 500 years, 1,000 years, a lot of them did implement a a national church. So if you go to the UK, the Anglican Church is like the official Church of England. If you go to Denmark, there is a official state church, and it gets funding from the church and from the government.
State.
The government is able to have some say and some influence over the church itself. Now, where I would push back strongly on that is that, and I think you would agree with me on this, is that there's a big difference between being a Christian on paper and being a Christian, in your heart and your mind. And
absolutely.
So how do you draw that distinction? Because if you simply say, hey, look, 95% of the country is Christian, but then you say also it's, 1% goes to church, and by default you opt in rather than, or you don't have to opt in. You're naturally by default marked as a Christian.
You have to opt out, right?
Something, and you have to manually opt out.
Yeah.
Maybe there's like financial incentives or reasons to stay in it, and there's no real incentives to leave, and it's just kind of a social cultural thing. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a Christian. And I don't think that I'm making a no true Scotsman fallacy. I'm not saying like, oh, you're not a real Christian, even though you claim you are. What I'm saying is these people claim not to be. And that's why I used the survey data from Pew Research and Gallup and stuff, where they actually ask people, do you believe in God? Do you believe in supernatural power? How important is religion on a scale of 1 to 10? And so you look at those types of questionnaires, and you see this downward trend and this downward decline to a point where they're the least religious countries based off of the survey responses. So when you look at that data, you can separate out and look, at kind of a macro level.
Yeah.
See, these countries are the people in these countries are more religious, and the people in these countries are less religious. And I'm not saying that becoming atheist makes them great people. All I was trying to demonstrate with that video was this idea that if you become secular, everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket, and the violence is going to go up, this is going to go up, that's going to go up. And what I'm showing is that the data doesn't show that to be the case. So it's not, I know correlation doesn't equal causation, but if there is an opposite correlation, then making an argument that, oh, look, this is the inevitable result of that, it's like, that's not what the data shows.
You know what? I will say I obviously disagree with you on a lot of topics, because I am a born again believer. But I will say I do respect the fact that in your analysis that you were doing on, I believe, you were doing like the worst arguments, like the top 13 arguments that Christians make. You were talking about people like Pol Pot and like Kim Il-sung. I think you mentioned Kim Il-sung, maybe not, but I think you mentioned Mao. You mentioned, and most atheists do something that is extremely dishonest, which they'll say, "Oh yeah, Stalin was a Catholic, or Hitler was a Catholic." That's the same way to say, like, "Oh well, you went to Bible college, or you did whatever, so you're still an atheist right now if you went and did something." It's just a completely dishonest way of reasoning. Because, I mean, I went to Bible college. I'll tell you this. You talk about the mission field. I went to Bible college, and a girl who I was in love with, like, went out onto mission field and got bit by a snake and, like, died, And that in itself wouldn't have done it to make me become an atheist. But that played a really big role. And I know that's an illogical argument. There's no rationality between a girl I loved getting bit by a snake and dying. But that was something like that. And then also seeing just the way that Christians were, like, my family's like Democratic, we're Latinos. And so they were very strict, like, no, you cannot be a Democrat and a Christian. And so my mom was a Democrat, she's very humanitarian, adopted all these people into our home, gave her whole life to humanitarian work. And I'm like, you've never met my mom, and you're literally going to sit there and try to tell me, without having met my mom, that like she's not a Christian. And so this is why, I'll tell you this personally, why I would consider myself a secular humanist as far as the government goes, because if you study church history, you will know that the church has been used to, and the state has been used to persecute, like, what you might call like a heretic, someone who, like, just say, for example, the Anabaptists wanted to have like a full Baptist immersion to get baptized. And they're like, all right, well, that's what you want. We're going to baptize you all the way. And they were literally drowning them. So, I mean, you can have persecution just even among Christians. And so I'm part of the, I'm a Pentecostal. And when I went to Bible college for the second time, they treated us like absolute dogs. You know, it was a Church of Christ church. So anyway, no, good.
A couple of things on that is one, in making that distinction of, you know, yes, there were horrific, horrible dictators in the 20th century who were, you know, atheist, communist dictators.
Yeah,
absolutely, that was the case.
Kudos for that. Kudos, by the way.
To just completely say that like that never happened, I think is disingenuous by atheists. I left Hitler out of it because there's a number of books that kind of go into this.
He was a pagan.
He wasn't a pagan, actually. He wasn't an atheist. He most certainly wasn't an atheist, but he also wasn't a Christian. And the distinction there that I want to make, there's a blog post by Tim O'Neill, who actually I just interviewed.
That one.
And it's like not the last video I did, but before that one. And
that was really good.
He goes really in depth and examines, you know, the arguments made by a lot of these books, people who talk to Hitler and stuff. And you can't just pull someone's background. So for example, like Joseph Stalin, he was, you know, he went to an Orthodox school, and I believe he was like
an altar boy,
like altar boy or something.
Yeah,
that's his childhood. People change their minds. You can't just say like he's that for life. With Hitler, he had he's in a very political position where he's trying to win over the favor
right
of the church, and people who were opposed to anti-Semitism, there, you know, were saying that it's not biblical. And so Hitler gets up and he uses my Christian faith like as a political argument. But then you have all of these conversations, you know, from that point in the 1930s onwards, where he expresses behind closed doors a contempt for the church and a hatred of it. But he also had a strong contempt for atheists. He thought that they were scum and vile and that they were just horrible and even worse.
Yeah.
Christians.
He's a hot potato. Christians are passing him to the atheists. Atheists are passing him back. Like, yeah, right.
There was some element of paganism and occult within the Nazi Party itself. I think in terms of demographics, it was less than the percentage that identified with like Catholic membership, but or Lutherans who are not Nazis as well. But as far as Hitler's regard for that stuff, he also had a disdain for that. He saw himself more as a rationalist or a skeptic, but he did believe in God, and he on quite a few occasions, both behind closed doors, talking to people as well as publicly, he talked about his belief in a creator God, his personal belief, his, you know, in divine providence, and as well as his atheism. So I think it's kind of a gray zone. So I'm talking about Hitler.
Yeah.
But you know, history is so complicated. People are complicated.
It is.
Pol Pot did horrible things, and he was an atheist, but he was supported by, you know, Ronald Reagan. And his regime, at least, and when he was, you know, when we pulled out of Vietnam and stuff, it was communists and the atheists and stuff who pushed back against Pol Pot, and a lot of the criticisms of Stalin came from people like Victor Serge. It came from atheists and stuff, and as well as communism in general and totalitarianism. George Orwell, you know, a very notable atheist, really pushed back hard against totalitarianism. So you can't just paint with this broad brush of like all Christians, all atheists, you know. Or if you believe this, you're going to become that.
Right. Actually, a couple of things about Hitler. One, there's some really fascinating biographical information that I wish more people knew about him. But one of the things is that he was hired like as a spy to kind of like check out some radical groups. I think like the communists maybe, but he would go into bars and like just listen to what people were talking about. And he picked up a lot of this, maybe ideas that maybe he didn't even personally believe in, like anti-Semitism. Those kind of things existed for hundreds of years in Europe, you know? So it's not like he created anti-Semitism, but a similar way, like when Donald Trump was going after the Muslims, we know that Donald Trump was using the same kind of tactics that Hitler was using, which I maybe not personally believe in this, but I can hijack elements of this faith and play to my own agenda. Here's a good example. Your channel is named after who? What is that famous thing?
The Holy Koolaid. Yeah. Initially,
Jim Jones.
It was a Jim Jones reference.
Yeah.
I chose to go with that name more so as a reference. It goes back to the phrase "Don't drink the Kool-Aid," which comes from Jim Jones. Right.
Yeah.
I found it really powerful when Anonymous and the Reddit community and stuff was pushing back against the Church of Scientology and protesting, chanting that. And
interesting. I didn't know that. But I did not know that, because I do live in South Korea, so I am sometimes out of touch with things that are going on in America. I am watching the Johnny Depp thing, though. That's freaking insane. Yeah. But actually, did you know that Jim Jones himself was an atheist?
I've heard that. I don't know. I don't know if that's true, because I know that he would, enact and claim, various forms of faith healing and pastor at the church. As far as what he personally believed, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but you should definitely look into that one. Of course, that's not.
Here's the thing: the
fact that he was an atheist, that's not really relevant. But
even if he was, it makes absolutely no difference to the fact that, I would still push back against it, because I'm anti-cult, and I think that following someone, putting someone on a pedestal, they have some sort of divine insight, and following them to your death, that's dangerous. So I will absolutely push back against cults, regardless of the cult leader's personal affiliation beliefs.
But the thing is, it's very similar, because I live in South Korea, and going to North Korea and seeing that firsthand, the oppression of the North Korean people, that is what put one of the biggest cracks in the ceiling of my atheism. I didn't become a Christian as a result of that, but it made me stop and evaluate what I actually believed in. But Kim Il-sung, the founder, by the way, what the Kim Il-sung, do you know who his son's name was, by the way?
Kim Jong-il.
Kim Jong-il, right. But do you know who Kim Il-sung's father's name was?
Oh, his father's name?
Mentally ill.
What?
But it's a joke, sorry. But so that guy, his mom was a really strong Christian. I think his grandfather was a pastor as well. So he actually built a church, I think a Presbyterian church, in North Korea. I've actually interviewed a missionary who went there.
Isn't Presbyterianism huge in South Korea?
Oh yeah. See, that's the thing. There's some cultural elements that go on here, because South Korea is Presbyterian, because they're hierarchical. Their hierarchy inside of the church works extremely well with their Confucianism. And here's another place where statistics can be really misrepresenting, because on paper, I saw on your little thing that on paper, South Korea seems really, really, really unreligious. But if you take a look at this, because it's 50% of the country, they would call it atheist or whatever, not believers. And it's something 30% Christianity, 20% Buddhist, something along those lines. But if you take a look at 20 out of the biggest 50 churches in the world are all based in South Korea. And I could take my phone outside and walk outside, and you will see a church on every other corner. So on paper, Denmark might seem more religious than South Korea, but the reality is that it's if people don't go to church every week, they'll say here, oh, I'm just not religious at all. So they might answer that question a little bit more honestly. So that's where it can seem really skewed. But see, I do want to get on to this next question. Oh, I'm sorry. But the point of Kim Il-sung was that he went to church and was oh, wow, I could totally hijack this, the songs, the admiration, the praise. And same thing with what's his face, Jim Jones. He himself was an atheist, but he was also in contact with Russia and North Korea. But he obviously hijacked elements of Christianity.
Yeah, and in a way, that is what they're doing. is they are creating a new religion. So you could say that they're not Christians, but it's a cult of personality. They're building a following. They're having, this backstory. There's these miracles. You look at the story of Kim Jong-un right now, and it's like, oh, he was born under a double rainbow, and there was a new star born in the sky. And doesn't defecate, and he always gets a hole in one every time he goes. He is a messianic figure. He is this godlike, divine, person. So even if they say, like, I don't believe in a god, they are practically worshiping this guy. He has these chants and hymns and solidarity, and all these people turn up, and like they still think that his grandfather is still running the country. He is and so it's I wouldn't necessarily go quite as far as Christopher Hitchens, who says like it's the most religious country on earth because it's like a necrocracy where they're worshiping a dead guy. But I mean they are, but it doesn't have quite the same structure of most organized religions in the way that we think of them. But to say that it is just completely that it is based in skepticism and humanism, and that the value or hey, let's go where the evidence leads, it's certainly not that. And he is elevated, almost to the level of a deity. And so if I'm going to be consistent and push back against religions and cults, then like I'm absolutely going to push back against that too. Yeah.
For the record, I did get this Juche. This is the official like North Korean philosophy. I actually got that tattooed on me inside of Israel, and in Haifa, actually, which is like the exact spot where Jonah is said to have fled from God. It's called Joppa, there, that area. Or I think it's in Tel Aviv. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it's like a little. It's a little.
It's kind of like it's right on the coast of Tel Aviv, kind of.
Yeah.
The Muslim district.
Yeah. It's really, really fascinating because actually the spot where Peter was said to have had the vision was the exact spot, or there's like Muslims like living in there now. So, I mean, imagine getting self-reliance and atheistic philosophy inside of you in the Holy Land. I was a pretty avid atheist myself until I had a religious conversion. But we could talk about that one because that would take probably an entire podcast, because part of my missions here is to bring light on that topic. And I do strongly believe that there is an atheistic influence there, because Juche is actually absolutely positively based in hardcore materialism. So we would have to unpack that one out for hours, though, because I have spent a lot of time researching that one. And it's certainly, I could understand why Hitchens would say what he did, though. But technically speaking, I don't think it's accurate. But okay, here we go. Next one. We can kind of go through these really quick because we only got about 20 minutes and we're still only halfway through here. But it's difficult amongst atheist influencers to feel pressure to endorse certain positions that you may or may not be comfortable with. Do you feel that?
I would say, to some extent, yes. In that a lot of times, especially in the US, atheism is associated specifically with a political position. And so people think like, okay, you're atheist, you must be, a leftist, you must be, a liberal or something. And really, to be honest, like atheism only answers one question. It's, do you believe in God or not? So if you're in the atheist community and you don't believe in God, but you believe in, spiritual energy and psychics and, divination and tarot cards, and
that happens. That happens.
It absolutely happens. Wow,
I didn't know that.
Atheist flat earthers, and so it can be, kind of.
You're lying now, right? You're trolling me.
No, it genuinely happens. A lot of times we think that just because someone is an atheist that they're going to be a naturalist, they're going to be a rationalist, they're going to be.
Wow, I did not know that.
And it's like I know a lot of atheists who are communists or socialists or social democrats, or like there's
or Trumpsters. There's Trumpsters.
But there's also
Trumpsters.
People who vote for Trump who are atheists, and they get a lot of pushback and hate for holding that position. But it kind of depends, and it's like there are positions that, like, if you're super vocal about one position, you're gonna get some hatred from members within that community. Others will be saying, finally, here's someone who is not taking that stand and is pushing back. I have pushed back against Jesus mythicism, and I'm not a mythicist. Which, if anyone in the audience isn't familiar with what that is, it's basically people who say that mythicists say Jesus never existed at all, and that he's kind of an amalgamation of different
that's out there. That's out there.
And quite a few atheists are mythicists, and they follow authors like Richard Carrier, Robert Price, David Fitzgerald, and they'll make these elaborate arguments for why Jesus never existed. And I don't think that there's good evidence or good reason to believe that any of the miracles or crazy stories about him rising from the dead and stuff, I don't think that those are true. I think that the stories are wildly inconsistent in the Gospels and contradict each other. And I've done whole videos on that, explaining in detail why I think that. But I don't think that it's inconsistent of me to say that there probably was a dude who, was born in the Holy Land named Jesus, who gathered followers.
Jesus. His name is Jesus. And he was Mexican.
He was seen as some kind of a apocalyptic prophet. They thought he was going to save them from the Romans, or he was building this following, teaching them. And then the Romans worried that he was going to be a threat to their stability, and he was murdered as a seditionist. And then his following is like, okay, what do we do with this? Where do we go with this? And over the course of time, trying to make sense of it, went back, and these stories kind of started arising, these legends and word of mouth and stuff. And before long, you have a religion that's springing up out of this. And I think that there's plenty of reasons to say that at the very least, there was a dude. There was a guy.
A dude.
How much? The question here, this is where like most atheists and Christians will disagree, is
of course,
how much of the stories about that guy are true. And atheists all up and down will say, like, well, this, but not this. Well, actually that, but not this. And well, none of it. And so there's going to be disagreement. Christians might say it's all true. Some Christians I've talked to don't even believe that the resurrection happened, but they say that they're a Christian. And I'm like, I don't know how you can, be that. But the point is
that's out there.
In me,
that's like saying I'm an atheist, but I believe in God.
Yeah, in me pushing back against atheism, I've had quite a few atheists give me a lot of hate and say, well, you're not examining this argument or that argument. And I'm like, well, I have, and I think that those are not convincing.
Yeah.
And with the big picture view, I tend to be more of a historicist. Yeah. But I kind of think that it's a little bit irrelevant. It's kind of a red herring. It's like, who cares if a dude existed? Let's look at how the world works. Let's see if like there's any merit to these positions. And let's not get distracted with, throwing out these theories that I don't think are well reasoned, and they just kind of make you look like a crackpot person.
Yeah, I think that's the equivalent of Christians saying, like, there's a guy who goes by the name of Gary Milne. I'm not going to say the name that he actually goes by online, but that's his name, Gary Milne. But he has this stupid stick about like transcendental arguments, and it is like a 5-minute loop that he just puts on over and over and over. Do you know who I'm talking about, by the way? He goes by Darth Dawkins. But it's such a stupid argument that is not convincing to. He's the most toxic person I've ever seen online. But anyway, the point being is that he makes really stupid arguments. So when atheists defeat those arguments, it makes them have like confidence that, we can defeat everything about like Christianity or religion, because you're presenting really stupid arguments. Like, for example, the prophecy one, actually discussed that with Bryce from Oz's channel, the Atheist Network, and about how that is just one of the worst arguments. That's probably in the top 3 The other, definitely the worst argument I've ever heard was the Shroud of Turin, because like in the best case scenario, that proves that somebody got wrapped in a linen. Like, what does that prove? Like, that doesn't prove anything. You know what I mean? That's the best case scenario. Doesn't prove it was Jesus. It doesn't prove. Anyway, I did interview a few atheists, like podcasters. I've interviewed about 15 recently. Kenneth Leonard, and your buddy Eric. Eric, what's his last name?
Murphy.
Eric Murphy. Murphy's Law.
From,
and but some of the other people I've said that I've talked to is that they've told me that they've gotten more hate from the atheists than they have from anyone else, because they feel like a pressure to be, like, for example, pro, like, vaccine or whatever. And so if they're not pro vaccine, people will get really upset with them, you know. And so I have heard,
kind of any community forms around beliefs, and when there's differences of opinion and disagreements, then it fractures. And I think what we're seeing with the atheist community, because it's so much younger and so much newer, is that we don't have millions of churches around the world with tens of thousands of denominations. And so what you get instead is you have one community, and they'll all kind of go to try to find some like-minded people, and they realize, okay, we have some differences, but there's not quite enough of us to split into two communities, so we're just gonna
right. That totally makes sense.
And so you don't have this solidarity in terms of, like, with, you know, Christian denominations, they're still splitting, but even then it's it's like, here's our list of things that we all
right. Yeah. Do you ever miss the community of like a church? I can imagine that would be the number one thing I would miss the most if I was an atheist, because I was an atheist myself for like 10 years. And that I still had to go to churches and do all the lingo, and even was like a missionary and even preach, because I mean, my mom flat out told me, like, if you deconvert, like, we're not going to have a relationship. So it's like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to risk that, you know? I mean, you had much more gonads than I did, because I wasn't able to do that. I had to move to South Korea to the point where I could finally come out of what I, out of that faith. But do you ever miss that?
I think when I initially left, you know, part of me, you know, wanted to still have a community, but I don't miss it at all anymore.
Okay.
I think that part of the reason that I don't miss it is that I have found community. I have searched for and found and built and brought people, you know, kind of closer to, in a way that, like, I have a really, really good group of close friends here, and, you know, getting involved in different things. Like Eric and V, Drew and Taylor, you know, GM Skeptic, you know, my girlfriend Hannah.
That guy's really good.
Yeah, and
that guy's done some damage to Christianity, man. The gods need to send a lightning bolt, strike that dude down, man. That guy's brutal.
Or iron sharpens iron. He's giving you guys a little bit of, you know, he's pushing you.
No, and really, if I'm being honest, almost nothing that you've said from your channels. And by the way, I started watching you like a year ago, and I never saw you in like person until like a couple of weeks ago, to where I started researching you more. So I'm like, you look totally different than your voice. I mean, you're using the little avatar. So, but a lot of the pushback you guys say with the toxicity and all that stuff, I'm like right on board. I mean, I'm as much of a secular humanist as any atheist as you'd meet. But you know, you just personally, I do think that no one has done more damage to Christianity than Christians themselves. So this channel is like, it's small, but I try to treat atheists with respect and, you know, kindness. And we support anti-LGBT bullying campaign, which we're going to make a donation on your name there, because that's one of the worst ways in which Christians have failed. Is I can imagine if Jesus was here right now, he would literally be hanging out with like prostitutes again, and transgendered, and gays and drug addicts and stuff. Those would be the people, the Muslims and stuff. And I do want to share with you one quick thing before I get to these last two questions, because I did go into Palestine in Israel as a non-believer. I was really into Islam. Palestine. Actually, crazy story. I didn't know this, but I went and stayed with someone who was staying in a settlement. And like literally you could look out and see like Jordan, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, and like Palestine, like in one view. It's crazy. So I walked down there and these Israeli dudes, this is a total side story, but these Israeli guys came up. I mean, I look like Osama bin Laden, man. I had a big old beard and turban. And they came out with guns and stuff. And they're like, let us see your ID and stuff, man. It was really scary, man. They were waving their guns around. And
it's wild.
But anyway, the point being is that I went into Palestine and I went into a mosque and I stayed there for like a week. They're having some kind of retreat. And I was treated with more compassion and more love amongst the Muslims than I was by far growing up in a Christian home, 2 different Bible colleges and multiple different churches. And actually the Good Samaritan parable, the backdrop of that story is actually Jericho, Palestine. So I know you have some questions on whether or not some stuff are real, from the Old Testament. I tend to think the strongest way to tell stories, the strongest way to make points is through stories. And I don't believe probably any of the parables took place, but that one specifically might have taken place because it's the only one that Jesus talks about the exact location. And so I am totally led to believe that that story maybe took place, and or it might have been Jesus Christ himself who got beat up and left for dead. And it was the people who had their religious training who went and left him and just try to walk around him or over him. And it would be modern day, the Muslim, the Hindu, the transgender person who might come along and help them and do the thing that the Christian should have been doing. But anyway, we got to breeze through these last 2 questions.
I mean, I would just say on that when it comes to hospitality and stuff, like one thing I have noticed just living in, the Middle East and Central Asia for so long is that there is a strong cultural aspect to that, where it's
absolutely,
open your doors and you're friendly and stuff. So I don't think that it's strictly a thing having to do with specific religions, but also there can be a lot of horrible hatred as well, especially towards ex-Muslims and apostates, people who leave the Muslim faith. Then they can face the same kind of shunning that you see among Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons and certain Christian denominations, where they're either kicked out of their house, they're beaten, they're shunned, people
or killed, worse,
or there's honor killings. And so you're looking at over 1 billion Muslims in countries around the world, and it's just not a clear cut Muslims it's such a general umbrella. Okay, but even then you've got so many different sects within Islam. Sunnis, different branches and divisions within Sunnis, Ahmadis, like it's not I know it's a minor quote a little bit.
But I could say this with a total straight face because I've interacted with Muslims in about a dozen different countries. And my best friend here, like in Korea, is Muslim himself. And we're really good friends, and we sometimes debate topics and stuff. But I can tell you, this is obviously not always the case, but 9 out of 10 times I've been treated better by Muslims than I have by Christians. So, and you know what? It's crazy. If you go to Albania or like I was in Kosovo, and you go there, it would really freak you out because you go into a mosque and everybody's like blonde hair, blue eyes. And you're like, this is so not what I think. We think that like the Arabics are like the majority of the Muslim, but they're actually the minority. They only make up like 30% of the Muslim. The largest Muslim country in the world, which is Indonesia, has like 200 million Muslims in there. And you never hear anything about those people going up and suicide bombing themselves. I think the terrorism and the stuff that winds up coming about, the radicalization, a lot of that has to do with imperialism done by the United States and Great Britain. But that's an entirely different topic.
A lot of it now is Wahhabist and Salafist exports from Saudi Arabia.
And Egypt.
But you hear the most probably from Saudi Arabia just because there's so much funding of it. And so you'll have, for example, mosques throughout Europe that are receiving funding and material from Saudi Arabia and the Muslim world.
Yeah.
But it's not exclusive to Sunnis. Well, Sunni or Wahhabist groups tend to be the majority of extremist organizations fall under that category. So whether it's Al Qaeda, whether it's Boko Haram, Muslim Brotherhood, like these are all Sunni groups, but there is some Shia extremism as well.
We got to blow through these real quick because we're coming up on the 1 hour 30 minutes. But if you could tell me real quick, what has been the general feedback of your channel, and have you gotten a lot of hate or love mail? And have you helped? Yes, that wasn't a yes or no question.
And
what has been the general feedback?
Yeah. The general feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. If I know YouTube has now hidden the dislikes, which is frustrating.
That is weird.
You used to be able to tell if a video was just like a crappy, unreliable troll video by looking at the like to dislike ratio. Now they've hidden dislikes on everyone. But
by the way, you kind of look like Jesus. I'm just throwing that out there. You kind of look like Jesus, but I'm sorry. Continue.
I've gotten that. When it comes to the
actually, Jesus probably looked more like Osama bin Laden than
the white Jesus of the
Sorry.
When I look at the feedback for my channel, the like to dislike ratio is overwhelmingly above 95%. Most videos are 98, 99% positive.
Wow.
Mostly positive comments. Obviously, the first comments that hit my channel and then get upvoted and stuff. So the ones that are kind of ranked that you see first are usually a lot of them are from subscribers.
Yeah.
Because YouTube initially pushes it out to. But even then,
I wouldn't know anything. I wouldn't know anything about that because nobody watches my videos. So, but anyway, I'm sorry.
So subscribers only make up a very small percentage of the views when I look at the analytics. Like what percent are people who already follow me and what percent are just people YouTube's promoting stuff to. But my feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I do, however, get hate. I do get the occasional death threat. I'll get a lot of messages from people that are like, you're doing the devil's work. How dare you, lead people astray. You're going to hell. You just need to read this crazy crackpot book. And then they'll send me some like weird Omega Code style, like, conspiracy theory, like, nut that's like breaking down the Bible and why Jesus is coming back in 2020.
Oh, you're making me hot. You're like, you're making me hot flash right now.
Those people, it's like, even when I was a Christian, like, I was like, that's intense. But also, we kind of saw those as like crackpots. The thing is that, on the internet, like, those are the people who like, send out these messages and like spam and blast out stuff. But I also get stuff from actual Christians that are upset or that are pushing back. But typically, my approach and my style, I try to be very careful to back up the things that I'm saying with the reasons why I'm saying them, and not just because like, hey, you're dumb or you're stupid or here's some authority saying why you're dumb. I try to lay out the evidence for why I've believed something I believe. And so even if Christians disagree with me on everything, they can kind of see my thought process of how I got there, and
that's good.
Respect the integrity of it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
you have more respect and integrity than some of the other stuff I've seen. So I would definitely give you props for that. But real quick, we'll have to skip the next question because I want to jump to the last one real quick. But I just do want to say the last question was, what is more dangerous, Christianity or atheism? I would definitely say atheism. You would definitely say Christianity. But the guy who you debated, like, I couldn't believe, like, as a Christian, I couldn't believe he couldn't just flat out, like, he's comparing hospitals being potentially dangerous. And yeah, if you're going to be honest, Christianity has the potential to do a lot of damage on this planet. So if you're going to be honest, intellectually honest as a Christian, you have to be willing to say that and say, it is a good thing not to let this get involved in the government because it will be abused. It will absolutely be abused. So it can be used to justify all kinds of obnoxious stuff. So keeping it on a personal level is, I think, most effective. But the last question is, what can we all do personally to progress this planet? And I will say this: recently, you've been doing an amazing job at promoting ideas that are like, okay, we're probably as in a species going to go extinct. So we need to be pulling resources and talent and science and knowledge to try to save ourselves. So, but what do you think is just some of that stuff is a little bit abstract. And so what can individually we do like to progress this planet, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many areas and it's easy to get overwhelmed, but I would say the number one thing is to not lose hope, to continue, taking steps and doing what you can. A lot of times, people will look at it and say, well, I can't really do anything. I'm not a multi-billionaire, I'm not a massive organization. And it's like, well, I mean, you could take your own bag.
Put chills on me.
You can take your own bag to the grocery store and not get a ton of extra litter. You could cut down on, the amount of plastics that you use. You could, not leave the water running unnecessarily or leave the lights on, turn off the light when you leave the house. It's like, those are such tiny, minor things, but like, we don't realize that all of our contributions add up. Like, cut back on your meat intake, your meat consumption, vote with your dollars, and, shift to, a diet that at the very least, I'm not saying you have to go full vegan, but that's an area where, we know that animal industry contributes a massive amount, negative amount towards emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. And so, those are small areas, but then also vote with both at the ballot box and, with your funds and through lobbying and petitions and stuff to try to save the planet, cut down on, emissions, pollution, drive your car less, carpool more. And if you're innovative and you have a little bit of understanding of, how to build and create things, try to build solutions. Because this isn't just one problem that we are, that we have to face as individuals. You're looking at 7 billion people on planet Earth who are all coming up with new inventions, new designs, new techniques, new tools, and talking about them and sharing their thoughts and going on forums and encouraging each other and testing things and sharing knowledge on social media and sharing new ideas and techniques. And it's so easy to just sit back and be complacent and just watch, the news and all the horrible stories of all these things that are happening. And the news has a negativity bias because it leads. And so we're terrified, we're glued to it. We think that the world is just all completely going to hell. And that's fine to get in small doses to light a fire under our butts, to like get off the couch and actually do something. But if we let it get us to the point of complete depression and frustration and hopelessness, then that's a dangerous point and a dangerous recipe. So the number one thing I would say that people can do is not lose hope and to continue, taking whatever steps you can.
That's really good. There's a lot of things that South Korea does that's really good. One is that people recycle all of their food here. So you put in like these buckets and then they go and feed it to the pigs. So you're not wasting that way. Another thing is that they charge you like 50 cents for the plastic bags. So it puts a lot of incentive to just bring your own bags. So South Korea definitely does a lot of things that I really like. But actually, just if you have any one or two last thoughts, I really appreciate the talk. Do you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just what I said about like not losing hope and stuff, I think is a good point to end on. But if I could do anything to your audience, whether it's Christians or atheists, I would encourage to always approach the world from a viewpoint of truth withstands scrutiny, and if something can be destroyed by the truth, it deserves to be. So don't believe anything simply because it is convenient to you or because you like the way it sounds or makes you feel. We can't change what is and isn't true, but we can change our feelings about it and how we accept it. So like I'll hear people say, well, if that was true, I would, there'd be nothing stopping me from wanting to end my life or something. And I'd just be so depressed. It's like, no, we can change our outlooks. And, as humans, we're remarkably capable of adapting. What I would encourage is go and learn and research and be open to new ideas. Try to be as objective as possible. Try to examine things from a standpoint of testing and trying to falsify and learning and staying curious. And I don't think
stay curious. That's good.
With that level of be cautious. Don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out. I always say dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid. Like, have that curiosity, but don't like just completely follow someone with no skepticism whatsoever into a dangerous place. But
so
yeah,
I do want to say a last word. First of all, thank you very much for agreeing to sit down and have a civil conversation. I think this is one of the things. I mean, there's probably 101 different things we could be doing, whether it's sometimes just riding a bike or taking a bus or trying to carpool or, as you're talking about, reducing things. But then there's also just understanding that, like, no matter where we are right now, like wherever you are in your spiritual path, like we're on this planet together. We're being flung across this universe, and you would say we're the only people that we have. But I would just say that as a father, you're not a father, right?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Well, you're only 32. I became a father at 32. So, but anyway, I became a Christian at 32. I became a father at 36. But anyway, like if you came to me and you told me like, hey, Isaiah, I think your daughter's like use some kind of profanity, and then you're like, yeah, well, let's go out for a beer. Like, I wouldn't care what you'd have to say to me. If you disrespected my daughter, like I wouldn't want to have anything to do with you. And so when I think about this as a Christian, it's like we're all God's children, and no matter where we are, if we're, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, Jew, gay, straight, tri, whatever, sexual, all these different sexual, I can't keep up with them all because it's like there's new stuff coming out, and I try to be informed, but at the end of the day, it's like we're all only seeing a very, 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 very small percent of what there is to know in the universe. So I don't try to debate people. I try to learn from people. And I didn't get to say half the things I wanted to say because I was so busy listening to you. But anyway, I think there's a lot of things we could do, but one of the can do is just treating people with respect, try to show a little bit of humility and also empathy. I think empathy is stronger than love because you can hurt people that you love, but empathy sees you. It's like disembodying yourself, putting yourself into another's shoes and asking, how would you literally treat yourself? And so I think if we have empathy, that will get us a long way in this planet. But that being said,
don't assume intent by others. Take care of the planet, go plant a tree, but also take care of other humans.
Yeah. And so, check us out. All of Thomas's descriptions are in all of his links are in the descriptions. Really want to thank you. And check us out at www.rtpodcast.com. Check us out at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Don't forget to like, subscribe. And if hopefully you found this, enlightening. But if you did, give it a share or a like or a comment, or we'd really appreciate it. So leave you this outro. And if you can stick around for 1 minute just to say goodbye. But here we go.